I have been waiting so long to talk about this one. So it's been 2.5 years since my last book review on this channel, and it was for the last book in this series. Yeah, I don't have an excuse for that. I'm so sorry. I'm wishing you all a warm hello and a welcome and thank you. If you've been waiting this long, I'm sorry. If you're new to this channel, what's up? This series is my entire personality. And while I do enjoy other books, nothing quite hits like a Tracy Deonn Legendborn Cycle book. So let's just get right into it, shall we? So I actually had the grand pleasure of receiving this book like a week before it came out. Go ahead and cue the footage. Like, I shouldn't be allowed to have this. Oh my God. So yeah, not only was I trusted with this gorgeous novel in my hands for over a week before the rest of the public got it, I also devoured it in a single 48-hour period while working my adult job. So, needless to say, absolutely worth it. Also, needless to say, I have been dying inside to express all my thoughts, feelings, and just general excitement about this series. So I'm going to do a non-spoilery little section at the beginning, just so that if you haven't read the book yet, you can absolutely stick around, see what my thoughts are on it. Then, of course, in the second half, I will be spilling every last detail on how much I loved it. So let's crack right in. First of all, in terms of the quality of all three books in this series, I feel like Oathbound stands just as same on par with Legendborn and Bloodmarked. And if you watched my other videos or read my reviews on them, that's just to say, it's freaking amazing. Tracy Deonn has this way of crafting, writing both action scenes and characters' emotional beats into this gorgeous, beautiful world, and everything I loved about the first two books is expanded on 15-fold in this one, and it's just impeccable. And as we continue to explore Bree's journey of self-discovery and grief and coming into her power, she just becomes more of the protagonist that is deserving of being on a cover that's this epic. Like, it is just absolutely astounding. And the way that this journey is so perfectly stretched across these three books, which originally the series was, advertised and sold as a trilogy, but now it is 4 books, and I honestly can't imagine where we would be if it were only the 3 books. First of all, I would hate for the journey to be over already, but second of all, the amount of growth that not only Bree, but Nick and Sel and William and Alice and Mariah, all of the characters in this series have gone through since that first book. It's just so necessary, so welcome, so amazing. I love it. I also wouldn't say there were a lot of new characters in this book, but there are quite a few who actually become a little more pivotal to the main storyline than I would have expected, and they also are a lot more lovable than I would have expected. For me personally, I can very much relate to Bree in Legendborn, who was the only Black student in her PWI for the most part. She was surrounded by whiteness and surrounded by this society where she inherently just was not accepted. And a lot of folks had a bit of complaints about that, like, oh, why is she the only Black girl surrounded by white classmates and white heroes? But that is just kind of a life experience that a lot of people go through. I did, especially in my own schooling. And now as Bree is growing into her power and discovering new things about herself, she's also meeting new people. And she also has a bit of a closer, tight-knit group of especially Black women, but other POC friends who are helping strengthen her and uplift her, and I'm very glad that we get to see that as well. We got a bit of it in Bloodmarked with Hazel and Aunt Lou and Mariah over at Volition, but seeing even more of that and seeing her develop genuine friendships with other Black girls is just so, so beautiful. I love it. Also, sort of on the topic of newish characters, I actually did not do a reread of Legendborn and Bloodmarked before this book came out. I will say I did reread Bloodmarked a few months ago, but I didn't sit down and do a full series reread. And part of me is just because it's like, this series is seared into my brain, I don't need to know or remember, but I did. Because there are some minor characters from Bloodmarked who show up in a more major way in this book, and definitely was not expecting that, and I'm also very intrigued to see where it goes. But I also just love the way that Tracy plants the seeds for little things throughout all the books. There are small mentions of things in Legendborn that come back in Oathbound, and it is just absolute genius. Like, obviously the major conflict throughout this book was Bree versus the Order in Legendborn, and then it's Bree versus the Order versus the Regents in Bloodmarked. But now we're getting onto Bree versus the Order versus the Regents versus the Morgaines versus the Shadow King, and there is just so much interwoven conflict. I'm talking with my hands a lot because I'm excited. There's so much interwoven conflict happening that is just has been there since book 1. You just didn't see it come to the forefront until now, and it's just so great seeing this natural progression of that happening. Like, it just feels right. Going back to what I said before about how this book is now the third in what is a 4-book series when it was originally based in the trilogy, Tracy has talked in interviews pretty extensively about how this is the book that was needed to propel Bree to the place she needs to be in order for the series finale to make sense. In a way, I think the way she worded it was more that Bree needs to come into herself and her power and be in a specific place to be ready for the finale. And now that I've read this book, I fully understand it. Because even though Bree is this powerful yet scared kid who is coming into this brand new world and experiencing all of this for the very first time, she's also a badass who figures out what she's doing. Like, she's able to tackle this new power and find herself in it so smoothly. And yes, she's a teenager and she makes mistakes and she has areas where she struggles, but I was very happy to know that struggle and that trouble and all that conflict she goes through is for a good reason. I know a lot of people were a little upset at the way that this book makes Bree struggle with her power, but I thought it was absolutely genius. You know, not that I know anything about the last book, obviously no one does except Tracy herself, but I feel like Bree at the end of Bloodmarked and Bree at the end of Oathbound are almost two entirely different people. She's still the girl we love, but she is in an absolutely different mental, physical state where I'm very excited to see what she's going to do in that 4th book. Also, even though this book series has been published over the course of 4 years, the series of events in this book have only taken place over a few months. So even though we may feel that Bree's journey is slow moving, Homegirl's been getting slapped left and right by all sorts of craziness, and she really would only be in her 2nd semester if she were still attending classes at college, which oof. And it's not just Bree going through this journey alone. Obviously, she has her members of the Order who have befriended her. She has Alice. She has other allies within the series. And one little fun thing Tracy finally did in this book was let us see from those allies' point of view. So not only do we get to see Bree, we get to see the point of view of 4 other characters in this book. Now, I know we've gotten bonus content from Sel's point of view or Nick's point of view, but in the book, across Oathbound, we jump POVs constantly. And honestly, the choice of which character she chose for the POVs was very surprising, but also so necessary, and I absolutely loved it. Getting to see within their complex minds, their thought processes, and kind of understand them a bit more just makes it feel so much more real and makes me love these characters even more. Going back to what I said about how this series has been published over the course of 4, almost 5 years, I feel like a lot of the readers have grown up with it, but have sort of forgotten the place they were in when they read the book 5 years ago versus now. Bree is still a 16, 17-year-old girl. It's been a couple months. So I know that one of the non-spoilery complaints that I was hearing about Oathbound was that it was a little too tropey. My friends, are we forgetting about Legendborn, which had the training montage scenes, the gala scene, the Twilight spider monkey riding on backseat? These books have been full of YA tropes since the beginning. It may just be that the reader base is getting a little bit older and sort of noticing them more, but this entire series has found a way to weave in some of my favorite tropes in a very, very fun way. And Oathbound is no exception. I think this was actually my favorite book when it came to certain little trends you see in books that you might be able to make a little chart of arrows pointed at. Not that this book would ever be summarized well enough in one of those graphics, but you know what I mean. It's also been pretty public knowledge that while Bloodmarked was more of a Cell-centered book, I mean, homie is on the cover of the book, Oathbound is the book where Nick gets to shine more. And as a day one lover of Mr. Nicholas Martin Davis, I was so happy. Like, I'm not choosing sides. I personally think it's OT3 or nothing. Bree needs both of her boys to make it work. But being able to see Nick be the main male protagonist in this book was so satisfying. Oh my gosh. Like, I knew that he was strong and capable and defied all expectations, and he is the Superman that Bree doesn't need, but she still has, and she's very happy to have that. But oh boy, the way he did it in this book was so happy. Oh my gosh. And obviously, yes, Cell is still here. He's still a main character. Do not worry. For those of you who love the dark brooding love interest type, he's still Cell and Kane. He's not going anywhere. We had some concerns for that. Y'all will be fine. But the only thing is, I can't say anything about his journey in this book that's not a spoiler. And I think that's actually a good transition. I think I've said everything I can say without spoiling this novel whatsoever. So if you haven't read it yet, please click away. Or if you haven't read it and still just want to know everything, hey, I can't stop you. So without further ado, let's get into the spoilers. I wrote 4 pages of notes for spoilers in this, by the way. So here we go. First of all, let's talk about the fact that the prologue of this book is 58 pages long. That is part 1. This all comes before part 1. Tracy, you genius. Oh my God. I have never read a 6-chapter long prologue before, and yet it works flawlessly. And then after that, we don't see Bree again and her point of view until page 183. She straight up throws Bree into the situation where she is gaining power, she's gaining control, tosses in a cute little, hey, by the way, your memory of all your loved ones is gone. You can't know their faces anymore. And then we don't see her for 140 pages. That was the cruelest and most diabolical thing I think this series has done so far, other than, you know, the cliffhanger of Bloodmarked. But oh my God. The idea of Bree losing her memory of all of her loved ones honestly was a choice I should have seen coming. I don't know why I didn't, but it makes sense. This is the same girl who burned her ancestral line. This is the same girl who has denied the order and denied her like calling to be the Scion of Arthur. Like the entire reason that Bree is able to be powerful is when she throws away all of what the world expects her to do and just does her own thing with no distractions, only determination. Now, did it hurt like hell knowing that she forgot her dad, her mom, her best friend, the boy she loves, like everyone? Yeah, but it makes so much sense. It makes sense, and it hurt, and it needed to hurt. Also, correct me if I'm wrong, I think this book confirmed that Bree is not straight. There's a cute little conversation between her, Zoe, and Elijah where they're just being teens and talking about what they're into, and Bree says, and I quote, "I like people." She didn't say boys. She said people. And seeing as Bree is Tracy Deonn's reflection of her young self, and Tracy herself has confirmed that she's pan, I think it makes sense. So I'm gonna be the first to be out here saying, yes, thank you, God, for confirming that Bree Matthews is not straight, because my homegirl could not be the token straight character in this series. I'm so sorry. If I am reading that correctly, and that is exactly what Tracy meant by that, I also love that this is the first time in Bree's life that she's thinking about it. Like, her attraction to boys has come naturally because she's had these romantic entanglements with them, but she had to sit there and think about it for a second. She was like, yeah, I guess I just like people. Because she's been a little too busy. I mean, even before she came into her power, she was like an honor roll, grade A, gifted kid who was doing all these extracurriculars and worrying about school and life, and she hasn't had time to sit and have a sexuality crisis, which, yeah, duh. Like, I didn't start seriously questioning my identity till I was out of college and had like less stupid things around me to worry about. So like, I can't imagine being in Bree's shoes at age 17, just taking a moment to sit down and go like, do I like girls? Like, she doesn't have time for that. Meanwhile, Selwyn, spent half his childhood sitting around and brooding in the same room with the boy he was in love with. So yeah, of course, he figured that out a while ago. He had different things going on, you know. We got a William Citterson point of view in this book. We also got a Nick Davis point of view in this book. Now, I was honestly expecting Mariah, and I knew there had to be a point of view either with Sel or with his mom, because they were going to be together and we had to know what was going on with him. So the choice of it being Natasha and not Sel was actually fantastic. I expected there to be a point of view for Mariah, surprisingly enough. But William, my baby boy, getting multiple instances of his own POV, just made my day. Nick only gets one chapter, which is a very necessary chapter, but it does hurt me that we don't get to see too much from his mind, but it still was just so well done. And on the topic of both William and Nick, when we first see them in this novel, they're using their white boy privilege to defend Bree to the regents. And I have never been more attracted to a fictional character in my life. Like, the way that they both stood up and spoke to this room of racist white people who were like trying every stupid flimsy defense to try and not let Bree be the scion and the leader of their entire order. And the way Nick and William were just like, actually no, yeah, we're not gonna do that. A quote from Nicholas Martin Davis. "I've lived beneath your violence. I've seen what you seek to hide, not just here, but everywhere. And in my time away from this court, I have seen and felt your truths more clearly than ever. Your supremacy, your misogyny, your racism, your cowardice. I only state out loud which you enact in plain sight, that which we can all see if we bear to stand witness. Will you punish me for doing so, your chosen son?" Brianna Matthews cannot be the only voice that speaks against you. Not when she bears our burdens for us and goes so unprotected. Not when you erase her humanity to guard your own power and protect your own whiteness. Can I have one? Can we like duplicate him in a farm somewhere and let me have one, please? And that's not even the only instance of Nick using his white privilege to get what he needs out of people. Like, I will get into all of that later, because those of you who read the book know where I'm going with this, but like, and staying on the topic of Nick, I know that we knew that he was abused by his family. We knew that he went through so much trauma and pain, but him just so casually bringing up the abuse that he faced from his father, like, we know that this entire society is so corrupt and unjust, but knowing that this tiny child was so terribly abused day in and day out, to be morphed into this perfect soldier, all for it to fall to nothing because they didn't realize the other situations at stake, just reflects so much on, you know, the real world and what's going on around us and the people that we elevate into positions of power who are meant for it versus the people who have unwillingly been thrust into it, and the way that both sides are just so beaten down by the system that is only trying to do the best for what they need. Like, they're human beings, they're children, they're not your soldiers. And the fact that throughout everything that Nick has gone through, he knows that if it were up to the regents to morph Bree into this perfect soldier, if they accepted her for who she was, if she had to go through half of what he did to prepare for her role, she would have fared so much worse than he did. And his inherent privilege of surviving it and still being as strong as he is, he knows that a young Black girl would not have been treated nearly as fairly as he was, even though he was treated so horribly. It would have been even worse for her. Onto our other point of view character, Miss Natasha Kane, Sel's mom, and the fact that her chapters are, at the beginning at least, structured as voice notes to herself was such a wonderful way of introducing us to her character. We learn her vocal cadence, we learn her actual motivations, we learn her reasoning behind why she disappeared and why the Order faked her death and all of the circumstances she went through to the point of abandoning her son. We learn the closeness she had with Faye Matthews, Bree's mom, and that very intimate love that they shared with each other, and the fact that obviously she is so much more alike to her son than any of us ever realized, because she also loved the Scion of Arthur. The parallels, man. The parallels. So good. Ugh. It's also both empathetic, but also just so disappointing that she is now trying to make up for the lack of being in Sel's life, but it's at a point where it's almost too late because he is succumbing to his demon side and there is just nothing that she can find she can do to help him, but she's still going to try, even though he is mentally, verbally, and physically beating the shit out of her. Oh my God. Like, she still loves this boy so much and she knows exactly what he's going through with his emotions. So she's trying her best to help, even though it feels hopeless. Like, that's love. That is love. Even if it's unconventional. Like, also her mentions of Sel's human father get a little interesting after you read the end of this book, but I'll get to that later. I do adore that we don't actually hear Sel talk in this book until 173 pages in, and the first thing he says is him swearing at his mom for not being able to fix him. Because of course it is. Let's go back to talking about William's POV for a second. I love the slow burn happening between him and Lark. Pretty much every romance in this book series has been pretty medium to insta-lovey. Like, Nick and Bree immediately had that connection. Sel and Bree, once they got over their animosity with each other in the first book, started immediately feeling that. Like, both boys were referring to her in a loving sense by the end of the first book. Whereas now William and Lark have known each other for 2 whole books, and over the course of this book, 3 months pass and they're still not together yet. It goes from William mentioning like, yeah, Lark's attractive, but I'm gonna ignore it, to Lark is attractive and I cannot ignore it anymore. But they're still not together, and I love that because there's gotta be some slow burn happening. It is my absolute favorite way to go about a romance, and it is beautiful and delicious the way they're both just like, yeah, we've seen a Scion date a King's Mage before and not good, so we're definitely trying to avoid that, but they clearly just can't. And like the little terms of endearment that Lark ends up calling William later in the book, because they've gotten so close, but they're just trying to avoid breaking that like professional relationship they have. God, I love it. On the note of Lark though, I do definitely feel for him because he is a product of this system of being raised his entire life to be a King's Mage or just to be a very powerful Merlin, and the fact that he is also unable to slot himself into the role that he was born to play because of everything that's going on. He is a good foil to Nick, who immediately just like rejects it all and is like, yeah, I'm not going along with that, to him saying like, I understand that this is what's happening now, but I don't really accept it because how can my entire reality shift so quickly? And I do like that we have that, because obviously everyone is not going to be a triumphant, valiant hero who always goes for the right thing. There is going to be conflict of people saying like, but this isn't how it was supposed to be. And he's not like an absolute dick like Nick's cousin who thought that he was the scion of Lancelot. It is actual legitimate conflict in his heart, and I am very happy for that. Also, I know it's existed since book 1, but it just gets piled on more and more. The somewhat possessive suggestion of being someone's kingsmage, like the boys fighting over who gets to be what. That's amazing. I love it. One of my favorite OT3 quotes I wrote down was Natasha was talking about Sel, and she utters, his liege and his bonded. Selwyn had them both because he needs them both, because he's imbalanced without both Bree and Nick, his knight and his king. It's almost like a soulmate trope, but like better. And also the direct comparison of both Sel and Nick's love for Bree manifesting in completely different ways, because obviously Nick's love is romantic adoration in its most straightforward way, whereas Sel's obsession with her and his fixation on her, the way that he constantly is thinking about the way her magic smells, the way her presence like overwhelms him, the way he has this carnal desire to get to her, whereas like Nick is there with her and he knows that he can't give in to that romantic love because it's fated not to be, but they both just know that their attraction and their love for her is undeniable and it's tearing at them in different ways. Tracy, Deonn, you're a genius. Oh my gosh. Both Sel and Nick see Bree as the ultimate goal for every reason except the one that she's fated to be. She's meant to be the scion of Arthur. She's meant to be the king. But Sel and Nick are the two people in the world who love her the most, not for that reason. This is a silly comparison, but like, you know how Entangled, when like Mother Gothel adores Rapunzel for her hair, but then like as soon as the hair is cut off, the first thing out of Flynn's mouth is like, you know, I've always had a thing for brunettes, but it's like, it's a funny haha joke, but like legit, he values her for the one part of her. And Bree's got 2 of them. Also, this quote absolutely drove me wild. Does the very thought of this scion of Arthur elicit such a hungry response in him? Does he want to serve them, protect them, worship them, or devour them whole? Gosh. Also, Natasha Kane's love and admiration for Faye Matthews is so similar to Sel's admiration and love for Bree that it just runs in the family, you know? Brianna is mine, my scion, my sovereign, my king, just as Faye was yours. Like, come on. Now let's go ahead and get into Penumbra, aka Trope Central, aka my favorite sequence in this book. We start off with a nice sneaky little vigilante shit moment of Bree sneaking into the basement of this manor, covering all the security cameras. She is head to toe in a red gown with a slit in it, slipping off her heels so she could walk more silently and try to steal something, only to be accosted by a mystery man who turns out to be none other than the love of her life, Nick Davis himself. And they have this entire dark grapple where suddenly he sees her and realizes that it's her, but she doesn't know who he is because her memory is still gone. And then it gets even better. The fake out make out in the elevator, the fake engaged and the we have to play a role, the forced proximity of we're all locked down in here and there's only one bed. The way I was going absolutely feral, I was reading these scenes at about 3 or 4 in the morning because who needs a real sleep schedule when you're enjoying a fantasy book? And I was so baffled that Tracy was able to actually put these tropes into this series. This is not a series that I would ever read and think like, oh yeah, it's gonna be an elevator fake out, make out, and then they're gonna have only one bed. Like, I know there was kind of an only one bed situation in the first book, but that was like, you know, staying at the lodge and she would crash in Nick's bed just after all the fighting and whatever. This one was literally just for the tension. And the entire sequence of this entire 3-day stint of them being locked inside this manor trying to retrieve the Shadow King's crown is just, it's YA fantasy gold, and I love it. That new but not really character that I wanted to touch on earlier is Ava. I don't trust that bitch. She showed up at the end of Bloodmarked. She comes back here in Oathbound. There is a line in one of William's POV chapters where Nick insinuates that she's trying to seduce him to the bad side, or to the Morgaine side, I should say. Whatever. And even William questions the wording of seduced, and then the way she's so mad once they get to Penumbra and Bree kind of takes over her place as Nick's fake fiance. I'm like, are you trying to get with my man? Go away. Skedaddle. Shoot, go away. I also love that Mariah and Zoe were so pivotal to this part of the book because obviously I adore Bree and her black girl friendships. I also just love having them get closer in this way of like everyone's revealing secrets and everyone's been holding information from one another, and having every single side of the conflict have a representative all stuck together, because we have obviously the Order represented by Nick, but not really, Bree herself, Mariah with the Root Crafters, Ava with the Morgaines, Zoe with the Shadow King. We have one representative of each corner of the conflict. Absolute genius. And all of them coming together and making these plans together to be like, yeah, we're gonna get the Shadow King's crown out of here because we obviously gotta get it out of his grasp, but what are we gonna do with it afterwards? Because that grapple for power is still there. So they're having to work together while like secretly like kind of not really wanting to work together, and I love that. Also, can we talk about the whole truth-telling serum situation of Nick valiantly taking Bree's place so that she doesn't have to reveal herself, but also him being asked the most heart-wrenching questions about their romantic life and basically revealing that he was never jealous of the attraction between Sel and Bree because he also knew that it was inevitable, and that the only reason he would be upset is that if they found love with each other and that he wasn't involved, because those are the two people he loves most in the world, and the fact that they had that happiness with each other and not him is the only thing that would make him sad. But he was never jealous and never angry and never upset about it. He would feel that pang of longing and wishing, but he knew ultimately like if it wasn't meant to be, it wasn't meant to be. And that he also utters the phrase like he was never upset with Bree because he doesn't deserve her, and that he truly thinks in his soul and mind that she is worth more than him. Like, I'm sorry, your favorite white boy could never. Mine, on the other hand. And of course, we can't talk about Penumbra without talking about certain things that happen in that only one bed hotel room sort of situation. Yeah, we've been talking about that since book 1 about how it's super forbidden and you can't cross the lines, but my girl knows what she wants, okay? Jokes aside though, I do really love that they had a genuine conversation about taking their relationship to that next level, and that Nick didn't want to do it while Bree was not wholly herself and didn't have her memories back. But also the fact that they are teenagers coming into themselves and their adulthood and exploring that side of themselves and not denying their attraction, just it's handled in such a good way, and I absolutely adored it. I am, however, going to send Nick to horny jail for uttering the phrase, "My blade is yours," and then us fading to black. What was that about, sir? Sir. And you know, I'm throwing Sel right in there with him with the like, she kissed me and I let her. Oh, how I let her. Like, sir. Both of you need to stop. Both of you need to stop. Obviously don't stop, it's very entertaining, but like, if I was reading that in public, my eyes would have widened and everyone around me would know what I was reading. And then of course we get to the very end of this book where we get reveal after reveal after reveal at the very end. The reason why Sel was able to absorb Bree's ether in Bloodmarked and not die is because, guess what? He is the direct bloodline of the source of the Bloodmark in the first place. Ta-da! He is the son of the Shadow King. Whoops. Some people called it. I never really put too much thought into the theories of this series because I just like to read it as is and not really try to think about what's coming up. But those seeds have been planted there since day 1 in Legendborn. On his door, his 2 initials, SK. Selwyn Kane, Shadow King. It's right there. It's right there the whole time. I do, however, have a bone to pick with Mr. Erebus, Aaron, whatever his name is, because Natasha Kane does not know that Sel is the son of the Shadow King. She refers to Sel's human dad, even in her own private voice notes. So what the hell was he doing? But also the fact that this man, this being, this idiot, has now underestimated both his own son and the girl he took captive to think that like, oh, I can just snatch back this power whenever I feel like it. I'm going to go for the most obvious power source. Guess who the most powerful sources are now? The girl you set free and your own son who you always denied. Those entire last couple of pages threw in so much. The Nick and Sel sun and moon comparison, and the fact that, you know, in that metaphor, Bree is the earth and obviously the sun and moon orbit the earth. And the 3 of them obviously have to operate as one to be able to defeat the powers that be. Love it. The wording of Sel's very last line, what shall we do? What shall we do? Not what shall I do? What shall you do? No, we, as in the 3 of them together. Because between now, the Order, the Root Crafters, and the Shadow King, our trio holds all the power. Of course, they have their own little conflicts going on, but it's almost like it's perfectly set up for the last book for them to do whatever needs to be done, you know, with the caveat parentheses of if they can make it work. Also, the reveal of the fact that Bree's blood mark lighting up throughout the entire book was actually most of the time Cell calling to her through the blood mark, not Erebus. Because we've known since book 1, Lancelot and Arthur call and response. We've also known Arthur and the King's Mage have their own connection, hence the emotional connection between Nick and Cell being able to feel each other's emotions. So we have the Nick and Cell connection, we have the Bree and Nick connection, now we have the Bree and Cell connection. They are literally all connected. Nick has the fragment of the Shadow King's crown embedded in his heart, which connects him directly to Cell, who can then call on Bree's blood mark, who then has the call and response of Arthur and Lancelot. If that is not set up for a canon OT3 to end this series, I don't know what is. You can't tell me it's not. I have so many other little things about this book that were just so delightful. I mean, Valak with his everything, his charisma, his charm, his power, his just, love Valak. The entire subplot of Bree trying to save the Rootcrafter girls and finding this community with fellow Black women and trying to help women who have been abused and disappeared find a safe haven and be returned to their families instead of being used for anyone else's gain. That one really struck a chord with me because obviously that is so much heavier than a lot of the source material we've been dealt with in the series in the past. And it's so real. I mean, if we think about the number of young Black women who are not taken as seriously in the medical field, whose criminal cases are not taken as seriously, who will disappear without a trace and no one goes looking for them. Again, the way that Tracy winds the real world's racism and bigotry into the magical world of Legendborn. Obviously, it is a contemporary fantasy, so it is based in the real world, but bringing it in with that magical element is just flawless. It hurts in all the right ways. And it's so beautifully satisfying to see these girls get a second chance when, unfortunately, in reality, that may not have been the case. And to see Bree be a bit of a small town hero in that way, like rescuing these girls as an entire side plot, she completely disregarded her entire mission because she knew in her heart and soul that that's was something she needed to do. It was something that called to her because she is just a good human and cares about her sisters in every possible regard. I feel like I would have so much more to say about this book if I had actually read it more than once. I did only do my one singular read through, and all of my notes and all of my thoughts were just word vomited out a week later when I came out of my Oathbound coma. So if I missed any major plot points or anything that you all wanted me to discuss more, I will happily talk to you about it in the comments below. So if you want to tell me about your favorite scenes, your favorite theories, or anything you want to hear from me, please let me know. I would be so happy to talk to more people about this book. Again, I had to stay quiet about it for like 2 weeks. So by this point, it has sort of filtered out of my brain, but I will lock right back in because, you know, I did buy color-coded sticky tabs for this book specifically. So on my reread, I can be even more detailed. But just as a first little word vomit out there into the world of how much I adored this series, here you go. So thank you all so much for watching. I am actually trying my best to get back into more long-form book content here on YouTube. So if you did like it, please feel free to subscribe and let me know what more you want to see from me. I look forward to coming back into my booktuber era this year. I've actually read more books this year so far up until today as I'm recording this than I did all of last year. So doing pretty good so far. But that is it for me today. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.